the Soviets become desperate for alternative ways of attacking the continental United States. This search will lead to one of the most incredible Russian bomber projects of all time. And the man behind this great machine was not a Russian, but an Italian. By the middle of the 1950s, the Red Air Force had thoroughly duped Americans into believing it had hundreds of Bison bombers ready to strike at US cities. In reality, the Soviets know they still lack a way of reaching the continental United States. Then an innovative aviation designer comes up with a solution. Build bombers that can land on the sea and refuel from Soviet submarines. There is only one problem with this idea. The genius is not Russian, but Italian.
His name has practically been erased from history, Roberto Bartini. Fellow Russian aircraft designers were jealous of him. Stalin was suspicious of him because he was a foreigner. His contribution to Soviet aircraft and rocket technology is one of Russia's best-kept secrets.
Roberto Oros di Bartini was born in 1897 in a part of northeastern Italy, which is now in modern Serbia. When the First World War broke out, young Roberto joined the army and learned to fly. Bartini was an idealist, and with the rise of fascism, he joined the fledgling Italian Communist Party, hoping to save his country from Mussolini. In 1923, Mussolini seized power in Italy and began sending communists like Bartini to prison camps. Bartini fled to Soviet Russia to avoid imprisonment. He soon found himself in a senior design position in the new Soviet aircraft industry.
In the 1920s, young men who were thrilled by the idea of communism, and there were quite a few, a lot of them managed to go to the Soviet Union. And the extraordinary thing is that the Russians tended to regard them with suspicion. And even if they proved that their heart was in the right place, like Bartini worked his socks off designing aeroplanes for the Russians, he still was regarded with suspicion.
In 1933, his Stal 6 design held the world speed record.
Bartini, before World War II, was developing some very high-speed aircraft. There was a fighter proof-of-concept aircraft known as the Stal 6. He developed the Stal 7, which was a twin-engined airliner in the 1930s, and that again had a very good performance, so much so that it was developed into one of the mainstay bombers of the Great Patriotic War.
Bartini's DB-240 would be the first Red Air Force bomber to raid Hitler's Berlin. But Bartini would never get the credit for his visionary design. He had actually been arrested in the great Stalinist purges that engulfed the Soviet aircraft industry after 1937.
Bartini's a good communist, so he's shocked by his arrest. Time goes by and he's in prison, and the head of the Soviet secret police, Beria, comes for a visit. Bartini knew Beria. He goes to him and says, "I'm innocent. Why am I in jail?" Beria laughs. He says, "I know you're innocent, Roberto. If you were guilty, I'd have had you shot. What you're going to do for me now is you're going to design me a brilliant plane, you'll get the Stalin Prize, and I'll set you free."
During his period in prison, Bartini was a mentor to several young Russian designers. One of these was Sergei Korolev, later the genius behind the Soviet manned space program. Korolev worked in Bartini's department and considered Bartini his teacher. When Bartini was granted his freedom, he moved to Siberia, where he worked as head of future projects at the Siberian Scientific Institute of Aerodynamics. Here in the early 1950s, he set about tackling Russia's need for long-range bombers.
At the end of the 1950s, the Soviet bomber program is a failure. The Bison doesn't work, the Bear is too slow, they need another answer, and that's where Bartini reappears.
Bartini's idea was to build a supersonic flying boat bomber. It was called the Bartini A-57.
Bartini's final designs were quite extraordinary. They were, if you can imagine a large aeroplane with a huge battery of lift jet engines pointing downwards in the middle, and then big jet engines at the back to push it along. And the idea was you could take off from land or water. You didn't need a runway, you didn't need an airfield, really.
A flying boat bomber would solve the range problem at a stroke. It could land on the water and refuel and rearm from a nearby submarine.
But Bartini also wanted speed. After lengthy experiments in a secret Siberian wind tunnel, Bartini perfected what he called the Bartini wing. This is a long, slender delta for high supersonic speed. The A-57 was designed to land and take off from either ice or water, which made it capable of operating from bases near the North Pole. It would be powered by 5 jet engines set in a row on top of the fuselage. It would have a top speed of 1,500 miles per hour. With virtually unlimited range, it could hit any target on Earth. It would have been the most formidable bomber yet built. In the event of emergency, the A-57 could come down on land using a large skid, and operating in secret from water or ice sheet, it would have been practically invulnerable to attack. In April 1957, Bartini is ordered back to Moscow from Siberia. He is assigned to lead a special design group to build the A-57. For the unrepentant Italian communist, this is recognition at last by his adopted homeland. But fate has other ideas.
Barely 6 months after his return to Moscow, in October 1957, Bartini's great protege, Sergei Korolev, launches the world's first Sputnik. The Russians decide that maybe missiles are a better way to go than bombers. Unfortunately, that means they cancel Bartini's amazing A-57 bomber project.